You're listening to this week's episode of the Vacation Rental Business in Today's World podcast. You're about to start transforming your business and life with the information found here. We interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in the vacation short-term rental industry and supporting businesses. The information found here is a combination of brain science, transformational thinking, safety and loss prevention, and vacation short-term rental knowledge and experiences, all rolled into one to help you and your business to achieve levels you never thought possible. I am glad you are here, and now please welcome your host, Eric Thibodeau.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Safer VRS. I'm Eric Thibodeau, and I'm glad you're here. This is the week of the 4th or the 3rd of April, and I'm in Houston this week, staying here and catching up on work and looking forward to the Easter weekend. I'm a devout Catholic, so be spending a lot of time at church this week, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, and looking forward to just a great time and resting and being here in Houston this week, and still working quite a bit. Still working on content here for this. This is the wrapping up the 5th principle of human performance here that we're going to talk about. And I'm also doing a video series on each one of these that'll be offering to members and clients. So look forward to being able to offer that for you. And I think it's really a powerful way of how we look at things. I mean, we could certainly talk about fire extinguishers and pool safety and driving safety. And gosh, we could talk about all of that. We could talk about housekeeping. All of that is really great. But these different principles really help us as leaders and as individuals running our businesses to be able to understand how the business operates. We have a basic, as leaders, we understand how the business operates, but we don't understand the day-to-day issues unless we're out there talking to the team. And then when we start talking about safety, some of these issues that historically come up for us tend to get in the way. And when I think about this, I was thinking about it this week, really, for the most part, most of us never really had a education or knowledge about safety. It's kind of always been, this is what we do. It's common sense. And then we take that into our business and we start to operate it like that. Like safety is this separate thing that we do every now and then. We talk about, we say it's number one. But as leaders, when we look at these principles, safety is how and part of what we work, how we work. When we're working in our operations, we're working in housekeeping, we're working in laundry. And when failures happen, and they will occur, when they happen, how are we working and dealing with those particular issues? Because when we look back at the previous 4 principles, people make mistakes, number 1. Number 2, blame fixes nothing. Number 3, learning and improving is vital. And then 4, context drives behavior, which we talked about last week. All of these are not about, let's say, just safety, but it's about who we are and how we run a particular business. This is what's really important. As we get into and begin to speak to this week's principle number 5, how you respond to failure matters. How you respond to failure matters. And we'll have failures in our businesses. This is inevitable. And I did a really detailed podcast and a training that's available for us. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it's about incident management. What do you do when something happens? How do you prepare? How do you deal with that? And that's more about, I call it doing. What are we doing for the business? But then this is really maybe to a lesser, even more, not lesser, about how we deal with failure. And so when failure happens, we have a couple of choices, right? We can get better, which is, I would tend to say this is how I like to work. I like to get better. However, there's what we typically find is the second part is getting even. So we can get better or we can get even. You can blame and punish, or you can learn and get better. However, you cannot do both. And when we say, well, we don't really blame and punish, Eric. We don't do that. And I'm thinking, well, let's think about how we do investigations. And I've been pointing out some of these things in our business here at Current Tides. And we have an issue with inspection or housekeeping, and the guest finds issues. And you could say, okay, well, we had an event, we had failure. What worked? And what can we learn? And understand the context around that. That's where I'm working with our team. However, I still catch myself, right? Because I'm learning just as you are. I'm out here working in the vacation rental industry. Sometimes I'll say, hey, who's that cleaner and why did they do that? Anytime we use the word why, it typically is meant to want to blame someone, right? And it's really a difficult concept to understand, not for me, but maybe others, and it takes a while to get there, is that everything in an organization you've set up. And you say, well, I didn't set up that clean to be bad. No, we have a process to clean. You approve that. You hired the person who hired the cleaner. So, and then how are we working now to rather blame and punish, but let's get better? And that's really what we're talking about here. How you respond to failure matters because the team is watching. You typically, our learnings have been reactive from events or failure in the past, right? That's what we're talking about. And learning from our mistakes and the mistakes of others is reactive and often after the fact. And this is what we do quite a bit, right? We want to, in today's world, we need a combination of learning from both proactive and reactive approaches. When we begin to anticipate how an event or failure would occur, that's proactive. And that's what we're doing in Safer VRS, right? When we're being proactive, it's much more effective and much more cost effective. So what do I mean by that? So as we've talked about before, we know we're going to have a failure. And so we look at not prevention, we look at the controls in place, right? I can measure controls, right? We are human beings. We like to measure things, right? We measure dollars. We measure our average daily rate. We measure our occupancy. We measure how effective our cleans are. We measure our star ratings from on OTAs and our websites. All of those things we measure. But then when we come to safety, we said, let's just talk about all the things that went wrong. Right? We talk about fires. We talk about injuries. We talk about whatever we're doing. But here, it's more powerful to talk about what are the controls in place to be proactive and then to make sure that a particular event doesn't happen. And when it does happen, we move to a safer state. That's being proactive. That's that part of the combination that we talked about. We want to be both proactive and reactive approaches, but how much more powerful it is to prevent, or rather say have controls in place to not allow it to happen, a failure, or when it does, it goes to a safe state. So this is why controls are so critical in how we work, as they're proactive, when in place, and well maintained. And this is part of what we do. We certainly look at the controls. However, we want to look at the system that monitors our controls, right? I call those self-verifications, right? That's why it's much more powerful. If the system is working and running the controls as possible, it's more powerful than just saying, I checked the smoke detector, right? What does that mean? When I check the smoke alarm, I'm checking for, does it have power? Does it function? Is it more than 10 years old? Can I hear it throughout the house? Is it latched to the other smoke alarms within the house? This is a system. It's a control that goes to protect our people. It's proactive. And then when one does alarm or it doesn't work, let's figure out what did work and what can we do to improve and understand what's happening, right? This is what happens. Failure happens. Let's learn and get better. Let's not blame and punish, right? So as I mentioned, our teams are always watching us. Our owners are watching us. The community is watching us in a big event, in a small event. People are watching how you as a leader are responding, and how you respond when a failure occurs will be observed, right? People are watching and will be shared whether you were successful or not successful, not successful in your response, right? And of course, those are labels, right? I think they're labels. I mean, what does it mean to be successful? My view of that is different than yours. However, understanding that in your business is important. What is not successful is also important. And how you respond to that. Are you going to learn and get better? Or are you going to blame and punish? Yeah. So it's also present when you respond to good or bad information. Once again, good and bad, or labels that we've assigned meaning to, and you determine how you want to really respond to that. So here's a key point for this topic. An event or failure will occur in your property management business or as a property owner. This is a when, W-H-E-N, and not an if. So this will happen. Something happens, and when it does, how are you prepared to respond to that particular situation? And so one of the things we're always wanting to look at, and we're talking about measuring controls, and when I'm measuring controls that I have to reduce the likelihood of an event or failure occurring, or when it does, it reduces the severity. And some people say, Eric, why is that really important? So if it's not just intuitive by I have something to measure, the opposite of that is I'm preventing incidents. What does that mean? Well, I'm doing some activities. Okay, how do you measure that? How do you know when it's working? And here's probably the best question that I've heard. And it's from Eric Hollernagel, who's a safety professional thought leader in this safety differently way. Here's a quote. What is happening in your organization when nothing bad is happening? End quote. I'd be interested in what your thoughts are about this particular question, because what is happening in your organization when nothing bad is happening is an excellent question, right? And we have a couple of ways that we could answer that question. You know, when you talk about the leadership team says, well, you know, my team is pretty complacent, they're lazy, these things aren't happening. That's why we're not having incidents, we're not really doing the work, or we're doing the work and it's just not really high risk work. So this implies safety is based upon the absence of risk. And this gives the impression of decreased risk leads to improved safety, which is completely not true. When I have risk that's less likely, right, is my safety improved? No. This premise of safety improves when risk is low is wrong. And a leadership team that's looking in that regard is not considering the right outcome. The next potential option that we could see is a leadership team will speak to the systems and personnel are performing as planned. So risk in the business is not decreased, right? We're not always able to reduce risk in a business at all. I mean, driving is a perfect example. I can take actions to reduce the likelihood of a severe vehicle accident or injury. However, I can't prevent it. And we've talked about these situations before. However, I have systems, I have processes, the people are performing, the controls are in place. This is what this is. This response from what's happening when nothing bad is happening is a leadership team, a leader is saying the controls in place are working. How do I know that? I go talk to my people on the front line. I go talk to my housekeepers and maintenance techs and inspectors and operations people. I talk to them and say, tell me what's happening. These leaders understand the capacity for successful work matches the level of work risk within the system. And safety is not seen as a normal function of operation and recognize the presence of capacity by the absence of events. What do I mean by capacity? Right? Every organization, think of it as a circle as I've described it. You can do so much activity within your circle, your sphere of activity. You grow your business without adding people, without adding additional resources. You're going to stretch that circle and it's going to overlap. It's going to spill over. So what do we need to do? We need to add resources, or we need to look at our circle and say, okay, the capacity of my business based upon my team and our resources, I can manage this level of risk in the business. I'm implementing these type of controls in the business. So now it's seen as a normal function of operation, right? When I'm going out and changing chemicals in a pool or adding chemicals in a pool, I'm wearing personal protective equipment. I'm testing the chemicals. I'm not mixing certain chemicals that could cause reactions because I've labeled those containers and I understand that. So I'm now managing that particular risk. Okay. It's how we do. It's based upon the capacity where the risk didn't change in the business. I just have controls and systems to manage it. And now that we recognize that the presence of the capacity of the team in managing the systems is more powerful than just saying, I didn't have any events. Okay. One I can measure, the other I cannot. So when we begin to understand the coupling of risk and capacity, leaders begin to understand their function as leaders when responding to feedback matters, right? That failure occurs. I'm receiving that feedback about what happens, right? And then we begin to say, as we learned in Principle 3, that learning and improving are deliberate strategies. An event response should be deliberate and purposeful as well. How we respond needs to be deliberate and purposeful to be able to get better and learn. So our goal here is that we want to learn and improve, get better, or we could blame and punish. We've talked about that. And some of this, all of this is I'm pulling from Todd Conklin's book, The 5 Principles of Human Performance. And he's got a story in here that I'm going to paraphrase because I thought it really, really brought home this particular point about we either can learn and get better or we can blame and punish, but we can't do both. In the book, he tells this story about a leader who comes forth and challenges this and says, I've been doing this for a number of years. I have using both concepts of I'm learning and getting better, and when needed to, I will punish those that have these particular incidents. And so there's some dialogue that talks about it, and the leader says, he continues to bring the point that it's wrong, you can do both. And the story goes on where they talk about when you're on a journey, right, a trip, you can choose a direction. You can go north, south, or east or west, whichever point to the compass you want to go on, but you can't go north and east. You can only go north or you can go east. And the leader just didn't really seem to understand that concept. And then someone said, hey, do you mind if I add something to this and bring this home to maybe a more local feeling? And Todd said, sure. And here's what this individual said about this. If you disapprove of your daughter's first boyfriend, you will never get to meet the second boyfriend. If you disapprove of your daughter's first boyfriend, you will never get to meet the second boyfriend. And it's really a powerful way of thinking. You take it out of the business context and talk about it in something that's maybe more relatable or family. And it really brings this point here that it stopped the whole conversation and gets people thinking. And eventually the leader came back and said, "You're right. I can't go in both directions anymore. Basically, I can't blame and punish. I want to learn and get better." And it was quite thoughtful event in those words, because the number of serious events, at this particular location began to get reduced, and also things improved, right? And what do we mean by things? The controls got better, right? The strengthening the controls and learning from the workers about what worked and what didn't work. And things got better. The people weren't injured. There weren't events or failures. And when they occurred, they weren't as severe as they were in the past, because how we respond really does matter. So as we begin to wrap this particular point up, right, because how we respond to failure matters. Every aspect of our improvements in our business and our property management is contingent upon a deliberate decision to improve made by your leadership, right? Improvement is not achieved by accident, no pun intended, right? It's deliberate improvement here. And we want to encourage the team, our owners, our guests to speak up when suddenly we seem to have more useful information and utilize this to improve our business, right? So consider when a guest complains about a particular issue, do we just say, well, that guest is ridiculous, we check that? Or what if we just say, how can we learn and get better from that? What worked? Let's talk about it. I mean, there's always the opportunity that the guest is incorrect, right? However, our first bias should be to say, what can we learn from this? May we learn whatever it is, right? The guest was correct, the guest was not correct, and we get better. Every part of our business, not just in how we're looking at safety, right? It's really a powerful tool. So as we've talked about here, I mean, how you as a leader react to failure matters. Even how you as an individual react to failure matters. So focus on learning, question things that are out there that you're seeing, right? How you respond to failure matters a lot. And you're being watched. And let's get caught doing the right thing. Let's talk about and demonstrate that we are learning and getting better, that we wrap up all the principles here. We understand that people make mistakes, right? It's given. We know that we want to not blame because it doesn't fix anything. We want to learn and improve. It's vital, and we want to do it deliberately. We talked at length about context and how that drives our behavior. So let's stop and look at the context in a failure occurs, and then know that how you respond to failure as a leader, as a business person, the owner of your property matters. I appreciate you listening today. Go out and create a safe day. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a happy Easter and get to talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Safer VR's podcast with Eric Thibodeau. If you enjoy this, I would love you to join my Facebook group, The Safer Vacation Rentals, for more of the same. You can also join our email list at www.safervrs.com.